1964. And at the time, Lyndon Johnson, who didn't know him well, said anybody with that early an age,
Madam Secretary,
coming to the Senate at the age of 36, could be president one day. Because Lyndon Johnson knew it took a lot of seniority in those days and a lot of experience to need the young start. In fact, Johnson remarked at the time that Walter Mondale came to the Senate after Hubert Humphrey had become vice president, that he thought Mondale was the youngest man to come to the Senate since Richard Nixon. And that Richard Nixon, about that age, had been elected vice president. So he said, you know, keep your eye on this fella.
Madam Secretary.
What's happening in the hall? The roll call of states continues now as the actual balloting, the first ballot at the 1984 Democratic Convention is on and underway with 1,967 ballots needed to win. There are 3,933 delegate votes. Now, there are actually 3,944 delegates in the hall, and the reason for that is that in some of the special categories, such as American Samoa, they allow more delegate bodies than they do delegate votes. But there are 3,933 delegate votes in the hall. It takes 1,967 to win.
For the conscience of the Democratic Party.
This is the Washington, D.C. contingent. Solid Jackson victory. He had the support of the entire district leadership.
5 votes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The District of Columbia cast 14 votes for Jackson and 5 votes for Mondale.
My present home state of Florida.
And that ups the Mondale count to 231. Our CBS News estimate is that when it's all is said and done, that Mondale will wind up with something over 2,100 delegate votes.
Pass.
Now, Florida, called upon, passes, and they'll get their turn a little later on. Our reporting indicated earlier that they were having some difficulty in the delegation. Some voters wanting to switch, and others are not quite sure, so the delegation chairman has passed, and they'll come back to Florida after a bit.
Madam Secretary, Georgia passes for the moment.
Georgia, where Mondale received a strong victory in the primary, also passes for the moment. This is very common in these roll call votes.
Hawaii, 27 votes.
Hawaii, one of the states carried by Jimmy Carter in the last election.
Write it down for him, Ronnie. Madam Secretary, Hawaii, the Aloha State, cast all of its 27 votes for the next President of the United States, Walter Mondale.
Jimmy Carter carried only 6 states the last time. Carried Georgia, West Virginia, Maryland, Minnesota, Hawaii, District of Columbia.
The state of Idaho, that great potato
Idaho
state,
and most of the other western states, of course, went for Ronald Reagan.
Mountains and lakes cast 10 votes for Walter Mondale, 12 votes for Gary Hart.
Madam Secretary, Idaho reports 10 votes for Mondale, 12 votes for Hart.
Illinois,
Madam Chairman, Illinois, the state that will send Paul Simon to the United States Senate, casts 39 votes for Jesse Jackson, 41 votes for Gary Hart, and 114 votes for the next President of the United States.
Key state, Illinois, always in any election, of course, Bill Moyers. This was the second turning point in the campaign for the nomination. It's where Mondale made his resurgence. Chicago is Jesse Jackson's second home. Mayor Harold Washington started out with his own block of delegates, later turned them over to Jackson. This is the first time in anyone's memory that the Cook County chairman and the mayor of Chicago are not allies, and that, for the moment, would not seem to bode very well for the Democrats.
Walter Mondale very much needs to carry Illinois and other key states in the Midwest if he's going to have a fighting chance against Reagan in 1984.
Our own Geraldine for
And that's going to be hard, as you say, because those Cook County Democrats would rather go to bed with skunks and sleep in the same den with skunks than to cooperate this year.
Madam Chairman, I am pleased to announce
This is Indiana.
that the Hoosier State, home of great basketball, where we will slam dunk the Republicans in November, proudly cast its 88 convention votes as follows: 42 for the great friend from the Midwest, Walter Mondale; 38 for the great senator from Colorado, Gary Hart; and 8 for the Rainbow Coalition of the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Hart handed Mondale a big upset in the primary caucus season in Indiana. Hart winning over Mondale in Indiana. The reference the woman made to slam dunk, for those of you who don't follow basketball, it's an outstanding shot usually made by a tall player in which they really jam the ball back down through the basket. Basketball, of course, a passion in Indiana. Bobby Knight, the coach of the U.S. Olympic team, is from the University of Indiana. No doubt another one of the reasons she wanted to make that reference.
2 votes for Jesse Jackson. 18 votes.
Every one of these conventions, Dan, has been decided on the first ballot since 1952, and that raises what is increasingly a question that politicians are facing, and all of us, which is what happens to these conventions when they are totally irrelevant.
1 vote for McGovern, 2 votes for Jackson, 18 votes for Hart, and 37 votes for Mondale.
The state of Kansas, 44 votes.
Madam Secretary, the wheat state of Kansas cast 3 votes for the courageous Jesse Jackson, 16 votes for our native son, Senator Hart, and 25 votes for the next president of the United States, Walter Mondale.
So, Bill, you're talking about they've been nearly all nominations decided now on the first ballot. For many years, the Democrats had a rule that required the candidate, the winning candidate, to have 2/3 majority vote to win the nomination. And the Democrats first used that rule back in 1831 to make Martin Van Buren's nomination for vice president look more impressive. But it stayed until the Democrats in 1924 found that the 2/3 majority rule made it so difficult to get a candidate. Remember, they went to 103 ballots at that 1924 convention, so they changed the rule. And since then, it's been much easier to get a first ballot nomination. One tends to forget that Franklin Roosevelt didn't get the nomination in 1932 until the 4th.
Louisiana, where we can make up our minds, and home of the great, wonderful, and continuing World's Fair, cast 19 votes for Gary Hart, 24 votes for Jesse Jackson, and 26 votes for Walter Mondale.
Louisiana, down where the hunting and fishing is always very good, was good hunting indeed for Jesse Jackson. It was the only state primary won outright by Jesse Jackson was Louisiana. And I noticed, Bill, that Geraldine Ferraro said that's a state where she thought she might make a difference, referring to the fact that Louisiana has a very large percentage of voters who are by religion Roman Catholic.
And they also have an outstanding woman congressperson in Lindy Boggs from New Orleans.
Cast 13 votes for Fritz Mondale.
This is the vote of Maine. This was in some ways the most devastating of Walter Mondale's defeats, the one in Maine. A lot of people thought that this had spelled the end of Mondale, but it didn't.
Maine has cast 1 vote for Biden, 13 votes for Hart, and 13 votes for Mondale.
The Biden vote, Joe Biden, the senator who has some aspirations to run in 1988. Be a lot of people lining up in that race if Walter Mondale doesn't win this year, wouldn't you think, Bill?
Wall Street Journal already started it off with a story this morning about who's emerging from this convention as the likely front-runners for 1988.
For Senator Gary Hart, 17 votes for Reverend Jesse Jackson, and 54 votes for the next president of the United States, Walter Mondale.
State of Maryland casting its votes. Bill, I confess, I love this part of the convention. It can seem slow. It sometimes comes late at night, but this is what it's about. This is the American experience. Nobody else does it this way. You can damn it. You can say that it's confusing and chaotic, but it seems to me it's so quintessentially American.
I just wish every American could sit up here and look down on this scene, because this is such a huge and disparate country. Quite remarkable to see it every 4 years compressed into one convention hall. And you look down and you do see so much of America here that you've never seen anywhere else at one place at one time.
Vice President Walter Mondale.
State of Massachusetts, where Governor Dukakis and Speaker Tip O'Neill were out front for Mondale, but Hart carried the state.
And 3 votes for Senator George
The
McGovern.
Mondale family in the former vice president's hotel room headquarters.
Has cast 59 votes for Mondale, 49 votes for Hart, 5 votes for Jackson, and 3 votes for McGovern.
The state of Michigan, 155 votes.
Labor speaks with a strong voice always in Michigan.
Madam Chairman, Michigan, the Great Lakes state, the home of the winning Detroit Tigers.
And they're speaking out loudly for the Tigers and Walter Mondale tonight.
Proudly cast 96 votes for the man who helped save Chrysler jobs, the next President of the United States, Walter Mondale.
Well, Bill Moyers, I'm glad he doesn't feel strongly about it.
Yes, they're timid up there in Michigan.
49 votes for Senator Hart and 10 votes for the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Michigan has cast...
Bill, they talk about conventions becoming dinosaurs, too much media events, outdated anachronisms. Personal opinion, clearly labeled, I don't believe it for one moment.
I would not like to see a society that was barren of ritual, including political ritual, and this is an important political ritual.
Minnesota, Walter Mondale's home state.
Minnesota thanks you for your work on behalf of this great party, Madam Secretary. Sister and brother Democrats, the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party delegation is proud to join with you all today in our common cause to retake the White House. Minnesota is a microcosm of these United States. Minnesota is a diverse in its population and its issues. Minnesota is farms and iron mines and high technology. Minnesota is a center of culture and education and health care. Minnesota.
Well, the crowd's getting a little arrested at this Chamber of Commerce propaganda the ladies putting out, but obviously the vice president, former vice president and his family like it a lot. Minnesota sent a block of 25 uncommitted delegates, most of them right-to-lifers, to this convention.
Minnesota is the home of presidential candidates, and Minnesota is the home of the next president
You
of
got
the
to see the
United
look
States,
on those
Walter
faces
F.
of the Mondale family.
Madam Secretary, with deep respect for the diversity of this great convention, Minnesota votes Senator Thomas Eagleton, 16 votes.
Eagleton,
Reverend
senator from Missouri.
Jesse Jackson, 4 votes. Senator Gary Hart, 3 votes. And for the next President of the United States, Vice President Walter F. Mondale, 63 votes.
Now, as we've mentioned, Minnesota sent a block of 25 uncommitted delegates, most of them right-to-lifers. Senator Thomas Eagleton of Missouri is a big pro-life supporter, and that accounts for the votes coming out of the Minnesota delegation for him. No surprise any of that to Walter Mondale, who, suffice to say, knows the ins and outs of Minnesota politics as well or better than any other living person.
Madam Secretary, the state of Mississippi cast 4 votes for Gary Hart, 13 votes for Jesse Jackson, and 26 votes for Walter Mondale.
Mississippi would be a tough state for Walter Mondale to carry. However, I've been interested, Bill Moyers, to hear the Mondale people say, listen, we think we have a chance. We think we have a chance to carry states such as Mississippi and South Carolina. At this very early point in the campaign, it's very difficult to see how.
You would need, and you could get, a significant, say, 95% turnout of black voters in Mississippi, and that could do it.
Votes 16 votes.
The vote rolls on here, and in San Francisco, Missouri now voting. Walter Mondale and his family enjoying, savoring every second of this apparent victory which they have earned, and earned the hard way by Walter Mondale coming up off the deck in the primary and caucus campaign, coming back after early losses, keeping himself alive with wins in Georgia and Alabama, and then going on to rally through Michigan, Illinois, and the rest of the way.
14 votes for Hart and 1 absent.
The state of Montana, 25 votes.
Madam Chairman. The big sky country of Montana, the most democratic state in the Rocky Mountain West, and the first state to send a woman to the U.S. Congress, cast 13 votes for Gary Hart, 11 votes for Walter Mondale, and 1 vote for Jesse Jackson.
Now, there is a report that Senator Hart may, I underscore that word, may be moving to the hall. We'll continue to monitor that situation. Note, if you will, that we had the report earlier from Eric Ingberg saying that if Senator Hart actually moved inside the hall, it would be a signal that he intended to move to make the nomination of Walter Mondale unanimous. There was some doubt earlier in the day, and has been all along, as to whether Hart would actually do that. And I emphasize that we don't know that he is moving to the hall, but there is a report that he might be, may be moving to the hall. I want to make it very clear that that is not confirmed. We do not have that as a report. We'll see as the evening goes along whether that develops or not.
Great Silver State of Nevada cast 1 vote for Reverend Jesse Jackson, 10 votes for Senator Gary Hart, and 9 votes for the next president of the United States, Walter Mondale.
Nevada has cast 10 votes for Hart, 9 votes for Mondale, and 1 vote for Jackson.
That was from the state of Nevada.
The state of New Hampshire, 22 votes.
This is where Gary Hart first broke through, stunned Walter Mondale with a knockdown in New Hampshire.
Nation primary state invites you to visit us every year, not just 1 in 4. We cast 10 votes for Gary Hart and 12 votes for the next president of the United States, Walter Mondale.
Bill Moyers, you have to take, in addition to taking your hat off to Walter Mondale, his wife and his family, how many political campaigns have they gone through? How many tough times, nights in motel rooms have they gone through? How many long, arduous days to reach this point?
Campaigning today has become a family affair, and you can expect to see the Mondale children and Mrs. Mondale and the Reagans. Maureen Reagan has moved into the White House to take over part of her father's campaign.
New Jersey is at the microphone now with a chance to vote. New Jersey is where Mondale won 45% of the primary vote, but over 90% of the delegates. This is a good example of what some people were complaining about. The only Hart delegate is State Party Chairman Jim Maloney from New Jersey.
The state of New Jersey passes at this time.
Now, the pass, we've had at least 3 of those through the evening as they try to get their delegation together on just exactly how their vote is going to go.
Secretary, the state of New Mexico, the land of enchantment, the land of multicultures, where we have already opened the political doors to everyone, the land that will send Judy Pratt to the U.S. Senate, proudly cast 13 votes for Walter Mondale, 13 votes for Gary Hart, and in recognition of our understanding of the need to share political power, 2 votes for Jesse Jackson.
New Mexico, one of those western states where the Democrats think they just might have a chance in the presidential election. The Ronald Reagan forces believe it'll be a solid west for them. The Democrats generally believe their best chances for breakthroughs are in New Mexico, state of Washington, and possibly, just possibly, California. Now the state of New York, scene of Hart's most crushing single blow, one he never really recovered from. Keynoter Mario Cuomo, of course, also comes from New York.
Roosevelt, the home of one of the greatest keynoters in history, Mario Cuomo, and the home of the candidate.
Gary Hart is leaving and coming somewhere. Now, whether he is headed for this hall or not, we simply do not know.
Cast 52 votes for Jesse Jackson.
I'm going over. Gary Hart was in this hall earlier, making his address, then went down on the floor, caused a stir there, then went back to his hotel, and the question now is whether he is headed for this hall or not. We shall soon know. The roll call vote goes on. 1967 needed to win out of the 3,933 delegate votes here. New York in the process of voting.
New York has cast 52 votes for Jackson, 75 votes for Hart, and 156 for Mondale.
The state of North Carolina, 88 votes.
The home state of Governor Jim Hunt, whose commission wrote the delegate selection rules.
Votes of the great state of North Carolina will be cast by the next United States Senator, Governor James B. Hunt.
Governor Hunt in a tough and expensive race against incumbent Republican Senator Jesse Helms in North Carolina.
Madam Secretary, the Tar Heel state of North Carolina cast 16 votes for Reverend Jesse Jackson, 19 votes for Senator Gary Hart, and 53 votes for Vice President Walter Mondale.
Governor Hunt was, of course, I say of course because it's fairly obvious, hoping that Walter Mondale would choose a running mate from the South, because Hunt figured that would help him a bit in his race in North Carolina. It was not to be. Walter Mondale chose Geraldine Ferraro instead, and now Governor Hunt and other Democrats in tight races in the South will have to figure ways to make the best of that.
Secretary, North Dakota, yes, North Dakota, the home of the International Peace Gardens, the place where the Native Americans are proud to represent the vote for the fellow citizens of the state of North Dakota, would like to enter their vote as the place where the rainbows touch the earth.
North Dakota enters 1 vote for the Reverend Jesse Jackson, 2 votes for Senator Thomas Eagleton, 5 votes for U.S. Senator Gary Hart, and 10 votes for Walter F. Mondale. Masagidas.
Love it. North Dakota, where the rainbows touch the earth. We'd talked earlier that this is a convention of people with real feelings, and going home to take part and lead in the election campaign.
And I'd like to say at this point,
and they're acting out on this stage tonight what they all see as one of the highlights of their lives. Ohio's own candidate, Senator John Glenn, turned in a disappointing performance in the primaries and caucuses. Hart scored a big upset here, but now Mondale has half the Ohio delegates.
Ohio, the heart of it all, the home of 2 great Democratic senators, John Glenn and Howard Metzenbaum, and 2 great national campaign managers, casts 80 votes for Senator Gary Hart, 11 votes for Reverend Jesse Jackson, and 84 votes for Vice President Walter Mondale.
The Mondale family's taking it all in, not missing a moment at their hotel, not too far from this Moscone Convention Center.
The state of Oklahoma, 53 votes.
Madam Secretary, the state of Oklahoma cast for Jesse Jackson 3 votes, for Walter Mondale 24 votes, and for Gary Hart 26 votes.
Oklahoma is where Gary Hart upset the labor-backed forces of Walter Mondale. The AFL-CIO worked very hard to pull off Oklahoma for Walter Mondale. In the end, it didn't make that much difference. And we're told now that Gary Hart is in this building in the Moscone Center. That would indicate, we were told earlier that if he came to the building, it would indicate he plans to eventually move to make the nomination of Walter Mondale once it's official, unanimous.
Will be delivered by Oregon's soon-to-be-elected first Democratic Secretary of State in 110 years, State Representative Barbara Roberts.
This is the state of Oregon doing its voting now.
Madam Secretary, the beautiful state of Oregon, still demonstrating the pioneer spirit that brought Americans westward from every corner of this nation, the state of clean air, clean water, and clean politics, the state of open doors, open minds, and open arms, proudly continues our long tradition of diversity by casting 2 votes for the Reverend Jesse Jackson, 31 votes for Senator Gary Hart, and 16 votes for Vice President Walter Mondale.
Senator Gary Hart has returned to the convention center, and as this roll call vote rolls on with a Mondale victory ever increasingly looking all the more certain.
195 votes.
Not that there's been very much doubt about it for quite a long while. There was a moment when the primary season ended. This is Jesse Jackson and his trailer also here at the convention center. So we now have 2 of the 3 candidates back in the hall, Hart and Jesse Jackson, with Walter Mondale about 2 blocks away in his hotel.
You have to wonder if Gary Hart moves that Vice President Mondale be nominated by acclamation. Will Jesse Jackson second it?
We'll be finding out the answer to that as we go along. Hope those of you who are with us tonight stick with us, and we'll see. There's some unanswered questions here. Will Hart move that the nomination be made unanimous? Will Jesse Jackson join him?
The 53 delegates.
How does it all shake out?
State of the Union, the 51st state.
This is Puerto Rico casting its vote.
Cast all their votes for the next President of the United States, Walter Fritz Mondale.
There was quite a fuss about Mondale getting the Puerto Rican delegation. Gary Hart and Jesse Jackson both challenged it, but to no avail. The Mondale family, as they have been all evening, right there on the couch, watching what's happening on television, no doubt watching it on CBS.
Is hope. With hope in our heart.
Let the record show I say that with a smile. We don't know.
Rhode Island casts
Walter Mondale being a man of exquisite taste and very good judgment, it's hard to imagine he'd be watching anywhere else, wouldn't you think, Bill?
Rhode Island has cast 12 votes for Hart and 14 votes for Mondale.
And the record shows that Mr. Warriors didn't answer.
I move to make that sentiment unanimous.
Secretary, South Carolina is proud to be the home of Fritz Hollings. Is proud to be the native home of Jesse Jackson. As Governor, I would like to offer Dr. Walker Solomon, the Vice Chairman of our delegation.
In South Carolina uncommitted initially came out on top. Now Mondale and Jackson have been running neck and neck, and so we'll see how the vote
Chairman of the
goes.
South Carolina delegation for permitting me to give the vote of South Carolina. Jackson, 19 votes. Mondale, 16 votes. Hart, 13 votes. Thank you, everybody.
South Carolina has cast 13
We were talking about the Vice President's family watching television. While Walter Mondale is often cast as an old-fashioned candidate, he's up to date on television. It struck me any number of times how much television he watches, news and public affairs. Either that or he gets some very good briefings, because he can tell you who said what to whom and who had what report when. It's become, like it or not like it, one of the necessities of modern politics.
Learned that, I think, from Hubert Humphrey and Lyndon Johnson, who who had 3 or 4 television sets scattered all over the place. They could keep up.
Illinois, and North Carolina in Democratic control of the United States Senate.
This is South Dakota casting its vote.
Cast 9 votes, Walter Mondale, and 10 votes for Gary Hart and the future of the Democratic Party.
Now, it may be worth noting that the Mondale floor operation at this convention is very disciplined and effective. Mondale has lost no votes from our CBS News estimate. In fact, he has gained 7. What we're doing is laying our estimate based on extensive interviews with delegates against the actual vote. And not only has Mondale not lost any votes on the floor, but he's picked up 7. Now, in fairness, it's been said any number of times that, well, Walter Mondale and his staff couldn't organize a 2-car wedding, and that they have made their mistakes organizationally along the way, that give them credit here at this convention. So far, they've run about as tightly disciplined a convention as we've seen.
He has 700 whips out there on the floor. A whip is someone who rounds up votes. Somebody said, why do you have 700? And the answer was, well, if you have 700 people with titles, you're bound to hold their loyalty.
Vice President Walter Mondale.
Jesse Jackson in his trailer with Walter Fauntleroy from the District of Columbia, among others.
Votes for Jackson, 20 votes for Hart, and 39 votes for Walter Mondale.
The vote from Tennessee.
Texas with 200 votes.
And now Texas.
Madam Secretary.
Texas was a big win for Mondale. He had it well organized.
2 votes for Glenn, 40 votes for Hart, 36 votes for Jackson, and cast 119 votes for the next president, Walter Mondale of Minnesota.
Texas, considered an almost must-carry state by the Mondale forces, at least at one point. And there were many in the South who felt that Walter Mondale should and would wind up picking someone from Texas to run with him in order to carry that state, figuring that Mondale would do well in the Northeast and would need the Texas votes to round out his electoral vote necessity. However, it was not to be. And both Lloyd Benson and the senator and Henry Cisneros, the mayor of San Antonio, wound up also Rands in the vice presidential sweepstakes.
And 8 votes for Mondale.
This is Utah's vote.
The state of Vermont, 17 votes.
Madam Chair, the state of Vermont is united. From our respected leader, United States Senator Patrick J. Leahy, to our assistant pages. From town meeting day back in Vermont in 1981 to this convention floor, 1984. United, Madam Chair, in its commitment to a mutual, verifiable,
Jesse Jackson watching the roll call vote from the Democratic Convention at the Democratic Convention headquarters, and the question is whether Jesse Jackson will move to make it unanimous for Walter Mondale.
For Gary Hart,
Walter Mondale with his wife Joan, his daughter Eleanor, his sons Ted and Bill at his side at their hotel headquarters.
1 abstention.
Now Vermont.
8 for Hart, 5 for Mondale, 3 for Jackson, and 1 abstention.
Vermont was one of those New England states that seemed more important when Hart was on a roll than it does now. Now we go to Virginia. Governor Chuck Robb was an early active supporter of John Glenn. He was widely known to think Mondale was too liberal to run well in Virginia.
Happy birthday, Virginia, where we have it made. Virginia, the home of Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, and Charles S. Robb. Virginia, the home of the lovely, charming, articulate, and bright Lyndon Johnson Robb. Virginia, the home of the first Thanksgiving at Berkeley. And Virginia, the home of the real Shenandoah, cast the following vote. Hart, 18. Jackson, 25. And the next president of the United States, Walter Mondale, 34.
The Republicans have been resurging in Virginia. For many years in which they couldn't get anyone elected dog catcher in the state, that they've been doing quite well in Virginia in recent years. By the way, helping Mrs. Bush is the assistant to the convention secretary, Sandy Perlmutter. They are the two women in charge of this roll call vote, the veteran Ms. Bush and her understudy, Sandy Perlmutter.
Madam Secretary, Washington State casts 36 votes for Gary Hart, the Democrat who can beat Ronald Reagan. 3 votes for Jesse Jackson, the conscience of the Democratic Party, and 31 votes for Walter Mondale.
This roll call vote is roll call order of states in alphabetical order. The District of Columbia comes after Delaware, Puerto Rico after Pennsylvania, and so on. Territories come after Wyoming in this order. Democrats abroad, Guam, Virgin Islands, American Samoa. So it's in alphabetical order, but remember, some states have passed. Walter Mondale rolling as expected.
Secretary, the great state of West Virginia, the home of 2 great United States senators, Robert Byrd and Jennings Randolph.
Now, West Virginia is one of the states carried by Carter Mondale in 1980.
The United States Senate proudly casts its votes as follows: 14 votes for Senator Hart and 30 votes for the next President of the United States, Walter Mondale.
West Virginia, a state where unemployment remains comparatively high, that is, compared to the national average.
With 89 votes.
Madam Chair, the great progressive state of Wisconsin, which stands for nuclear sanity around the world and fairness at home, cast 6 votes for the Reverend Jesse Jackson, 25 votes for Senator Hart, and 58 votes for our good friend, neighbor, and next President of the United States, Walter F. Mondale.
Wisconsin was where Alan Cranston gave Mondale a shellacking in a straw vote about a year ago. It was one of Mondale's biggest campaign embarrassments, one which he came back from, but at the time it was quite an embarrassment. Mondale now has about 2/3 of the Wisconsin delegates, and this is the way the count looks at the moment. Mondale continuing to roll toward the magic number of 1967. This is Wyoming, the state of Wyoming casting its vote.
The right of suffrage to the first women.
We're told that upon leaving his hotel, Senator Hart was asked if he was going over to help make it unanimous for Mondale, and characteristically, with tongue-in-cheek, Senator Hart replied, "No, I'm going over to accept." Gary Hart is now in the building, as we reported previously, as is Jesse Jackson.
Missouliville.
7 votes for Mondale, 7 votes for Hart, and 1 abstention.
The Virgin Islands with 6 votes.
Madam Secretary.
So, Bill, we'll be finding out soon whether this effort of Walter Mondale to reconcile himself with Gary Hart and Jesse Jackson, reconcile all the divergent various elements of the Democratic Party together and walk out of here together, is going to actually happen, or whether Walter Mondale is going to have to continue to fight to make it happen.
I bet it happens.
And 2 votes for Jackson.
When Mondale goes over the top, as is expected, there's to be a big fireworks display. I want to point out that we're in the Moscone Center here underground, and how they intend to get that fireworks display underway, I'll be very interested to see. I'd also like to know where the fire exit is here.
The right to vote in presidential elections.
Another little act of spontaneity.
Cast Guam's unanimous 7 votes for the next president of the United
Mrs.
States.
Bush has done this
Walter
for Franklin
Mondale.
Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Adlai Stevenson, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey, George McGovern, and Jimmy Carter.
7 votes for Mondale.
America with 5 votes.
Dorothy, Latin America cast its 5 votes
These are votes from Americans who live in Latin America.
To name Geraldine Ferraro as his running mate, Walter Mondale.
The running story here, Bill, continues to be that Mondale has the convention under control, and what everybody wants to talk about is his selection of Geraldine Ferraro to be his running mate. Getting close now to putting Mondale over the top, and you can see on the faces of the Mondale family that look of anticipation. Almost, here it comes.
3 billion people of this world proudly live.
Walter Mondale has been working on the address he is to give to this convention tomorrow night for quite a long while, realizing, as so many people have said, is that he'll have to give the speech of his life if he's to, at this convention, if he's to have any real chance for the election.
3 votes for Mondale, 1 1/2 votes for Hart, and a 1/2 vote for Jackson.
American Samoa with 6 votes.
Madam Secretary.
So these are the, this is the end of the alphabetical order now casting its votes. There are some states that had passed a little earlier on. Florida had passed. Georgia had passed. And
5,000
Iowa had passed. Kentucky had passed. New Jersey had passed. So we still have those states tell us how their delegations are going to vote.
Mondale.
As all of you know, there were several states that passed as we went through the original roll call. I will continue with the roll call in just a couple of minutes.
Put the nomination over.
Well, that's right. The states play this game of wanting to be the one that put the nomination over the top. Senator Hart's in a holding room underneath the podium now. Further indication that he'll have something additional to say to the convention, widely expected to be to move that Walter Mondale's nomination be unanimous once Mondale goes over the top. Jesse Jackson remains in his trailer with his aides, also on the convention premises. And this ritual, this pageant, this gigantic social and political affair comes nearer and nearer to the climactic moment of when the nomination becomes formal and official.
And then all Walter Mondale has to do is beat Ronald Reagan.
In this air-conditioned bunker beneath ground level where everybody is reasonably comfortable, it's a long way from even as recently as 1924 when they held that 103-ballot marathon in the heat and humidity of New York City, the Democratic convention that wound up nominating John Davis, who turned around and lost Warren Harding. And H.L. Mencken could write some terrific prose about those long ballot nominations. As we mentioned earlier, they're all behind all the parties.
The first state to pass was the state of Florida. The Florida delegation ready to vote at this time with 143 votes.
Florida. The Florida of the future and the home of the great American Senator Claude Pepper. Has 1 absence, 2 abstentions, 3 votes for the Reverend Jesse Jackson, 55 votes for Senator Hart, and for the next President of the United States, Walter Mondale, 82 votes.
Florida was Reuben Askew's home state, of course. Hart won the primary, but now Mondale has the bulk of the delegates. Florida, Bill Moyer, is another principal battleground state. It's one where the Mondale forces talk optimistically, at least, saying there's a big southern state where we might pick up some electoral votes. All of the recent polls show Ronald Reagan with a large lead in Florida.
With 84 votes.
Madam Secretary, the great and progressive state of Georgia, the home of the great senator, Democratic Senator Sam Nunn, cast 24 votes for Senator Gary Hart, for Reverend Jesse Jackson, 20 votes. For the next President of the United States, Walter Mondale, 40 votes.
Georgia, Jimmy Carter and Burt Lance's home state. Mondale badly needed to win that one in the primary, and it's easy to forget what the drama was on Super Tuesday. Hart had knocked Mondale down and very nearly out in New England. He was rolling. He seemed to be Hart on Super Tuesday. Mondale had to have Georgia. He got Georgia and Alabama, and that saved it for him.
The home of the only woman governor.
It's over to Mondale, but lost out to Geraldine Ferraro in the vice presidential sweepstakes anyway.
7 votes for Reverend Jackson, and for Vice President Mondale, 51 votes.
And 51 votes for Mondale.
The state of New Jersey with 122 votes.
Most of the roll call has been completed. These are states that had passed in the first roll call, and now New Jersey is up. This could be the one that puts it over the top for Walter Mondale.
You sense that on the floor just for listening.
Now, former Vice President Mondale apparently has a copy of the newspaper. It says Mondale is it, but they don't want him to show it on television. So it's all right. As far as that's it. Mondale wins.
Dorothy.
New Jersey will do it. It's okay to show that newspaper headline, Mr. Vice President.
The state which ratified third the Constitution of the United States and in whose territorial waters proudly stands the Statue of Liberty. We are proud of our support of Walter Mondale, a man who has shown concern for all the people, whether they be the minorities, the working man, the labor movement, the women. All of America is the concern of all the people of our nation. We had put Walter Mondale over the top in June in the primaries, and we are now putting Walter Mondale over the top in our convention in San Francisco by voting each and every single vote of 122 votes. Correction, Dorothy. Correction.
It's over. Walter Mondale wins it.
15 votes for Walter Mondale, 7 votes for Jesse Jackson, no votes for Hart.
Walter Mondale, with a long, tough, uphill fight, wins it. Hugs his wife, Joan, and then in order, his daughter, Eleanor, and his sons, Ted and Bill. Walter Mondale, about whom it was said for many years that he was too standard, too establishment, not flashy enough to make it as a presidential candidate, has made it.
This is Sino 1. The objective is secured.
Transmit the warning in exactly 11 minutes.
Kai D in the compelling role of a master spy.
How long will it take us to get to Peking? I'll be dead on arrival. Dead tomorrow morning.
Will Gear, an outstanding performance as a scientist whose brain is the prize. Sabrina Scharf, the daughter, whose love threatened her father's life.
I see your cop mind at work. Your nice cop mind. Better dead than red.
Hawaii 5-0, Monday at 7 on 20 Vision.
You're watching KTXH-TV, Channel 20, Houston.
Hello there, everybody.
Headings in blue. Headings in black. And collated.
This job is for a multiple choice copier, the Canon NP155. Its zoom system makes a full range of enlargements and reductions, up to 15 copies a minute in black, brown, or blue, and can collate.
Do I know how to pick a value?
Yes. Yes.
Canon's NP155 gives you more for less. For information, call toll-free.
Fleas and ticks are always on the attack, so it's important to have all the right weapons to protect your pet. That's what Hearts Care is all about. Hearts has a whole family of 2-in-1 products, like the famous Hearts 2-in-1 long-lasting collar. Now it kills fleas and ticks for 5 months, even when wet. And you'll love its low price. For extra protection, spray regularly with Hearts 2-in-1 flea and tick spray. In aerosol or pump, deodorizes too. At Hearts, we give you a choice for complete flea and tick protection. That's Hearts Care, everything good for your pet.
You know the fiber in Metamucil is good for you, but Metamucil is 50% sugar. Now there's Fiberall. Fiberall has the sugar-free formula preferred by 3 out of 4 doctors surveyed. Fiberall, the laxative fiber of Metamucil. But instead of sugar, more healthy fiber. Fiberall. No wonder 3 out of 4 doctors surveyed chose the formula in Fiberall. Fiberall does everything Metamucil does without the sugar. Fiberall.
I'm Bill Curtis. Tomorrow we'll talk with football's Terry Bradshaw and in our 8:30 half hour, comedian Steve Allen. Wake up to what's happening on the CBS Morning News.
This is CBS.
Coming up next on Region 10 News, we'll have a live report from the Convention Center in Waco, where Vice President George Bush is scheduled to address supporters tonight. The Waco City Council today made some decisions that you'll probably be feeling in October if you use water and garbage pickup in Waco, and we'll continue our series on child safety. Tonight, a look at safety on the home front. We'll have these stories and more news coming up next.
Blended to quench a thirst and cool the very spirit.
California Cooler.
Come and be refreshed beyond ordinary refreshment.
California Cooler.
Yeah.
More beef in your burgers, more beef in your loaf, more beef in your meatballs, tacos, sloppy joes.
Kroger introduces the More Beef Ground Beef, a new standard in ground beef, guaranteed extra lean. For more beef per pound, put
more beef in your meat sauce. More beef, more beef, more beef. It's more beef for your money. It's the new More Beef Ground Beef.
Only when you go Krogering.
Go Krogering for 100% pure ground beef in chub packs, only 89 cents a pound.
Gifts of gold or silver coins have almost always increased in value. Some of the silver dollars Grandma handed out are worth hundreds today. And a $10 gold piece given back in '32 could be worth thousands now. For the first time, you can give Olympic gold and silver U.S. coins. But these Olympic coins will not be made after this year. And while the Olympics will soon be over, Olympic coins will be cherished for generations. At many banks, coin dealers, fine stores, savings and loans, and post offices.
This is Channel 5, KXAS-TV. Coming up, Channel 5 News at 10, the best newscast in Texas. Brad Wright, meteorologist Harold Tapp, and Scott Murray Sports. This is Channel 5 Action News.
Of Mondale and Ferraro is way over to the left of the Democratic Party in the state of Texas. It is
I prefer to campaign on our record, what we've done and what we intend to do, and that's the way I'm going to conduct myself in this campaign.
President Reagan in Washington and Vice President Bush in Texas tonight launched the start of a 3-day political attack designed to blunt criticisms leveled against their administration during the Democratic National Convention last week in San Francisco. Vice President Bush is in Waco this evening after whistle stops today in Tyler, Wichita Falls, and Abilene. Throughout the day, Bush has done some tough talking. more or less confirming what Reagan campaign advisors are predicting, a rough and nasty campaign between now and November. Channel 5 political reporter Bob Letter has been with the Vice President today, and he just returned from Waco. Bob?
Well, Brad, Vice President George Bush is obviously setting himself up as the heavy for Republicans in what is shaping up to be a rough and tumble campaign. Now, as we saw from his news conference, President Reagan will play a more benign role. And in Tyler and Waco and Abilene today, it was clear Republicans in Texas like the new tough-talking Bush, particularly in Waco tonight.
About family values. Values that those national Democrats, that liberal fringe, those special interest groups haven't paid any attention to for the past 20 years. The fact of the matter is that these newfound values don't come from the heart. They come out of a computer that shows that Ronald Reagan has awakened the heartbeat of the country by emphasizing family values. So I can't honestly tell you. But
Mr. Bush started his day with a news conference in Tyler where he scoffed.
What an extraordinary sum. It completely obscures the subject I'm painting. Sorry, now.
What do I get, Jennifer?
The piano. Or the kitchen. WKRP.